on Sky News Australia. This is the Rita Panahi Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, we cover everything from the mistruths behind the gender wage gap report to a 15-year-old Australian girl having a double mastectomy after identifying as a boy, to Jewish comic Jerry Seinfeld being harangued in New York and called a Nazi. And a controversial relationship expert joins me, and he has a message many women don't want to hear. Brace yourself, ladies. And as always, plenty of lefties losing it. But first, this afternoon, former PM Scott Morrison delivered an emotional farewell speech where he defended his government's COVID response, thanked colleagues, quoted Taylor Swift lyrics and scripture, and shed a tear thanking wife Jen and their miracle daughters.
I love you, Jen, and always will. That is the cross you have to bear. Your love has been my stay and strength. You are the other half of our joined soul, who by the grace of God brought Abby and Lily our miracle girls into our lives, who we celebrate and love.
Let's bring in Sophie Elsworth, media writer for The Australian. Sophie, it was a good speech, I've got to say, had the right amount of emotion, right amount of humour, levity. But what will Scott Morrison's legacy be?
Well, Rita, yes, the speech was quite good. Scott Morrison, as we know, isn't always the best public speaker, but I was listening to a lot of media reporting on him today, and it just ran through a shopping list of some of the things that happened on his watch that weren't great. The I don't hold a hose comment, the holiday in Hawaii, the getting up in Parliament and talking about the situation with Brittany Higgins, which was very problematic. So there are definitely things on his, resume that don't look great, and also all those secret ministries that he appointed himself to. So I think, unfortunately, when a politician ends their term or ends their career, they're often remembered for the things that they did that weren't great.
Oh, look, I think you're being quite harsh. I think a lot of those incidents were media-generated controversies, including the holding the hose. Politicians make those sort of throwaway remarks all the time without it being used to bash them over the head. And even that Hawaiian trip, I mean, I've a critic of a lot of his term as Prime Minister, but I think a lot of the controversies we remember were media-generated.
But the getting up in Parliament and talking about the alleged rape, when he talked about that, that was shocking.
That was a massive mistake, and he was very lucky he had parliamentary privilege to protect him when he did that. Now, let's go to the unprecedented levels of migration Australia is currently experiencing. Net overseas migration from July 2022 to June 2023 was 518,000, a record high, and I'm talking about net migration there. And yet we're accepting plenty more. The numbers could go up even higher. Judith Sloan wrote this in today's Australian: there is little doubt that the Albanese government has begun to read the political tea leaves on immigration. Even though cost of living remains the major concern of voters, the proportion of survey respondents who now nominate immigration also as a concern has doubled in a year. Sophie, even Treasury can't keep up with these remarkable numbers. Just a few months earlier, they were predicting net migration would be 400,000. It actually was 518,000 for that period. So if Treasury is that far out, what are we doing here? This seems to be uncontrolled.
That's a big problem, Rita, and that's a big calculation mistake there. That's a lot. That's not just a few tens of thousands. That's a lot. And the flow-on effect, the impact, and everyone, what seems to be front and centre isn't just cost of living, but it's the cost of housing. And this is impacted by the shortage of housing in Australia, pushing up house prices, people saying they can't get into the housing market. So it has that flow-on effect. So the Labor government really need to do something about this, and quickly, because it seems to be getting to a situation it's really problematic.
Well, it is, and it's not just housing, but it's the strain on resources. You're talking about schools, hospitals, the roads, and there seems to be no planning around this. They just get the sugar hit from the economic activity generated when there's more people around, but people's standards of living are suffering. So we're not better off. And I think if we had a referendum on this issue, the results would be clear. Now, a story that got a lot of headlines today, you'll probably hear about this throughout the week, is the first gender wage report that has been released, which lists companies. So this will list more than 5,000 companies which employ more than 100 people. Sky News was listed in those companies. Sky News has a gender pay gap of minus 1.1%. Now, what that means is that women, on average, get paid more at Sky News than men by 1%. Whereas you look at Nine Entertainment, their median gender pay gap is 10.1%. So, on average, men make around 10% more there. It's always the woke ones you have to watch out for, Sophie. It's interesting, this data. The national gender wage gap is 19%, and now, according to the ACTU president, Michelle O'Neill, she said this about the report. She said the pay gap is symptomatic of work done mainly by women being undervalued. Now, they've changed their narrative there, Sophie. For a while there, the gender activists, many of whom can't tell you what a woman is, by the way, they were arguing women were being paid less for doing precisely the same work men were doing. Now they're saying, no, the companies aren't valuing the types of jobs women are doing. I mean, you've got companies like Qantas that have got quite a significant gender wage gap, but you can understand why, because, well, the pilots tend to be men. Right. A lot of the engineers are men. And, of course, they're going to be earning more than someone working as a air hostess. Are we allowed to say hostess? Is that
flight attendant?
Flight attendant, yes. So it makes sense. But if you listen to the unions, we've got to value the flight attendant role more and pay them more. But it's an relatively unskilled role compared to a pilot or an engineer.
The problem with these type of reports, Rita, is it's not just so simplistic where it's men versus women and, you know, is there a gender pay gap? There's a lot of different situations that go into it, you know, the amount of hours people work, the type of roles they work. It's not as simple, like you say, as we use the airline example. Of course, pilots will get paid more than flight attendants / air hostesses. So there's going to be a difference between their salaries. So I take these sort of reports with a grain of salt, but I don't think it quite got the narrative that they were hoping for.
Well, I don't know, because so much of the media reporting throughout the day has just presented these figures as proof of institutional sexism and misogyny and women are downtrodden, and they're not looking at the deeper picture. They're not actually looking at what the roles are, the seniority, the hours worked. Right. The hours worked are a huge contributor to that gender wage gap. Now, the Business Council of Australia, they're gearing up for a pre-election fight with the Prime Minister. They're urging him to reverse policies that have crashed investment. Sophie, business leaders are warning that Australians' quality of life is at stake ahead of the May 14 budget. This is interesting because for a long time they were hesitant to take a position and actually fight these issues. They were too interested in social issues rather than what actually matters to people running businesses.
Well, I think, Rita, especially as we lead into the budget in May, this is going to become more front and centre, and everyone is talking about the impacts of cost of living. Everyone is talking about the economy. People are more concerned than issues such as The Voice, and that has really damaged the Labor government, in my view, because there was too much focus on that issue when they should have been focusing on what's impacting the mums and dads and the punters in the suburbs. So I think we will see more of this as we lead up to the May budget. But action needs to be taken, Rita, because we were promised things such as the $275 drop in electricity bills. We haven't seen it.
Well, no, it's gone the other way. But I think big business has also been damaged by that focus on The Voice, because they were so busy advocating for a position that was on the wrong side of history, that was a minority position, and we had the big banks, all of the big banks.
They went along with it,
Qantas,
Rita.
Sporting clubs, they were all on the yes bandwagon, and I think they're damaged as well. They're standing in the community, so they've got some work to do. Now, we've had another statue of Captain Cook destroyed in Melbourne. This time it's in East Melbourne, near Cook's Cottage in the Fitzroy Gardens. Sophie, we know previous attacks involved anti-Australian sentiment. There's been graffiti about colonisation sprayed on some of these statues in the past. The neo-Marxist vandals certainly feel emboldened in Victoria.
Rita, I just find this so disappointing. Last week I was in Sydney, running through the parks in the city, and there's statues everywhere, and there's statues standing proudly in the Sydney CBD. And you come to Melbourne, and we've had two very significant statues now chopped down by activists, and it's a really bad look, not just for Australia.
It's the third in quick succession.
Third. Thank you. It's really bad look for Victoria and Melbourne, and this should not be happening, but it seems to be repeat offences, and it's always in Melbourne.
And also we've got the councils, and they're all different council areas with these ones, but we've had councillors argue, well, we shouldn't erect the statue because it's divisive. So you're basically giving the vandals an incentive to go and do this.
Right.
Now, the councils, certainly City of Port Phillip is going to re-erect that historic statue, but I think even having a debate about giving these vandals the right to determine policy is emboldening them further. Now, I want to play you some just shocking footage. I'll play this a longer version of it a little bit later, but comedian Jerry Seinfeld was harassed and heckled by feral anti-Israeli protesters in New York City as he left a Jewish-themed event. Have a look at this. They even call a Jewish comic a Nazi. Sophie, this is getting so ridiculous. He's not even a political figure. He's not someone who's very politically active like a lot of celebrities are. And just because he's attended an event with a Jewish writer and he's Jewish himself, they feel entitled to treat him like that.
Well, isn't that, Rita, the definition of anti-Semitism? I mean, just attacking him like that because he's a Jewish man is appalling. He should be able to go about his business. He has not been outspoken on this. He's pretty much kept to himself on the issue, and yet he's out and about and getting criticised like this, Rita, and attacked. It's totally unnecessary.
Oh, it is absolutely absurd. They're not doing themselves any favours whatsoever. Now, to your favourite topic, I know you insist on talking about Prince Harry every time you're on. I've tried to get rid of this topic, but here we are. There's a new documentary on Prince Harry, and it's launching on streaming site Hulu, despite the fact that the Duke has this enormous Netflix deal, rumoured to be worth $150-odd million. I do love, Sophie, how Netflix continue to be reminded almost daily that they made a horrible decision to invest so much money in Harry and Meghan. All they've seemed to have produced was that god-awful reality series that bored everybody.
Well, I think, Rita, initially people wanted to hear what they had to say. And yes, initially it probably was a good decision by Netflix, but their story is getting old. People are sick of their whinging and they don't want to tune into it. So now, really, the situation is Harry and Meghan need to look elsewhere because their financial deals are drying up and people are getting sick of hearing the same moaning and groaning on repeat.
Now to a children's favourite getting a new rating. The age rating of Mary Poppins in the UK has been raised to PG now because apparently the film has discriminatory language, Sophie. Were you aware of this? The film uses the word Hottentot, which is a colonial Dutch word for the Khoi people of South Africa. It's thought to imitate their language, which is considered offensive. Admiral Bloom used the word twice in the film to ask one of the children if he was going on an adventure to defeat Hottentots. And later, when chimney sweeps with suit-covered faces are spotted, he shouts, "We're being attacked by Hottentots." Oh, Hottentots, I think, is the correct pronunciation. Really? Do we need a new age rating to protect the young'uns from such
Rita. No.
disturbing language?
No, we don't. And it's really worrying when whoever these activists are go back and try and rewrite history. Just leave these movies, these shows as they were in their era and let them be. It's actually... it's good to look back on these sorts of shows and programs and films without them being massaged, and to change the actual rating is ridiculous.
Well, I think so as well. I've got to say, I've seen that film at least a couple of times. I've never even noticed it. I mean, it's something that you would have to be a super fan to Google this word and then see what the obscure reference is. Sophie Elsworth, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Rita.
Joining me now is Women's Forum Australia Research Fellow Stephanie Bastian. Stephanie, the UK government has revealed nearly 3 in 4 transgender prisoners currently held in British jails are serving sentences for serious offences like sex offences, violent crimes including rape, child sex offences and grievous bodily harm. There are 244 transgender inmates, 144 of those identify as women, and 5 of them are housed in female jails. Stephanie, women's rights campaigners are arguing that the high levels of violent crimes among male prisoners who identify as women is just further proof that they have no place in women's prisons.
Good evening, Rita, and thank you for having me on. And I think they're right. The fact shows that male patterns of behaviour, criminal patterns of behaviour, do not change. In fact, it should be worth looking at whether or not they increase with transgender inmates. Now, if you're a man and you are predisposed to violence against women or sexual offences against women and you're housed in a male prison, if you have the opportunity to then transfer to a female prison, why wouldn't you? We are in a time at the moment where that is supported, it's promoted. And in fact, when I interviewed a source from the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, this was an employee at the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, this source told me that the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre was put down into lockdown so that a male prisoner who identified as a woman could go and tour the facility. So we have a situation here where men are identifying into women's prisons. In fact, in the international community, I mean, we talk about rapid onset gender dysphoria in children. There's another term in the international community, which is prison onset gender dysphoria. And I think it applies here.
It is absolutely crazy that in Melbourne you do have a sexual predator who has a male body, identifies as woman, in a women's prison. And like you said, no one is listening to those female prisoners. They're completely disempowered. The Victorian opposition isn't really interested. Labor certainly aren't interested. And the prison authorities have been completely captured by this ideology. So here we are. And I've got reports today of an Australian mother saying she has found a surgeon to perform a double mastectomy on her 15-year-old trans daughter, calling it a happy day. The female child was reportedly given a referral by the Royal Children's Hospital here in Melbourne. Stephanie, is this really happening in Australia? We've had cases, and I've spoken to some of these girls myself. Some of them have detransitioned, who had double mastectomies when they were under 18. I didn't think that was happening in Australia. Are kids who are under 18 having irreversible surgeries in our country?
There are certainly strong reports that show that they are. The Daily Mail ran a report where a woman called a clinic and they said that they performed surgeries on children, on girls as young as 13.
We need at least some clarity on what's happening. The fact that we don't know definitively who's having these surgeries, how many, at what age. There needs to at least be some data provided so we can see what the scale of this issue is, if there's been a dramatic increase. But there seems to be so much secrecy around the data in this country. Now, I want to ask you about a report from the New York Times on Instamums using Meta-owned Instagram to sell pictures of their daughters to male buyers. Here's some comments under a photograph of a 9-year-old girl in a bikini. Just disgusting comments from saying, great body, take the bikini off, you're so hot. Only one comment saying she's a child. How widespread is this problem? I mean, why would Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, allow this? If you post anything, even questioning, I don't know, catastrophic global warming, you get a fact check straight away. How can they be selling these sorts of images to perverts without their accounts being shut down?
Look, Meta have a serious case to answer here, and we know that several months ago there was a report that pedophile rings were also using Meta to buy and trade access to children. The problem here also, we need to call out the mums who are doing this to their children. These children cannot consent. They are as young as 11, perhaps even younger, and they're setting them up on Instagram. They're putting them into the report said that they had exclusive content that could be bought, where they would have private chats with these followers. Who wants a private chat with an 11-year-old in a bikini? Pedophiles, predators. Oh. These women are selling access to these children, of their children, to these men for money. And I don't know where our e-safety commissioner is either, Rita. They're running around censoring everything. One of the reports was from a Melbourne mum. One of the sources was a Melbourne mum talking about her experience with her daughter. Where is the e-safety commissioner cracking down on this stuff? Why isn't Meta being penalised for dealing with it, for not dealing with it?
Absolutely. And where are the police? I mean, that sounds like something the police need to be involved with. Stephanie Bastian, thank you so much for your time this evening. And still to come, I speak with relationship expert Jake Maddock. He's got some harsh advice, but is it sexist advice? He joins me next. And coming up, Annelise Nielsen with some remarkable poll numbers for Donald Trump. And of course, lefties losing it. That's up next. You're watching The Rita Panahi Show. Joining me now is Sky News' Washington correspondent Annelise Nielsen. Annelise, some very interesting poll result from Harris-Harvard revealing that if Donald Trump was convicted by a jury for inciting the Capitol riots on January 6th, it would actually boost his chances of victory. Let's have a look at this data. It's very perplexing for some people, but it also is true that if he's convicted for trying to influence the 2020 election result in that Georgia case, that conviction would also boost his chances. Why do you think that is? Why are so many Americans losing faith in the justice system?
Well, look, I think there's a few different reasons why we're seeing these results come out through polls. This is a pretty interesting one because it goes into such depth. But this is pretty much exactly what I was hearing from Trump supporters, especially in South Carolina. And this is very much perceived by a bulk of Republicans as being something that's politically motivated. They don't tend to distinguish between the cases when you try and go down into the details of the merits of one case over another or one particular jurisdiction. They don't really differentiate between it. And the other thing that really happens is it puts him back in the media. He is back in the news. He hasn't been having that mainstream media coverage for quite some time. But when the trials happen, people see his face and they remember that this is all going on. And so this is when they see those donations come in. And this is where Donald Trump is pulling ahead of Nikki Haley, is in the small donations, the grassroots donations. And a lot of that has come through this, the legal issues, that they see him as being persecuted and they want to support him through that.
And we saw that in South Carolina when Nikki Haley outspent Trump considerably and still just recorded a really quite a humiliating loss.
Well, look, it's humiliating in that it's her home state, and it would have been expected that there would have been more of a groundswell of support, but 40% isn't nothing by the same token. I think one of the things that has happened in South Carolina that's happened to Haley in a few states is she's just being outperformed on the campaign trail, which is kind of interesting when you think in 2016 when Trump was the outsider. He was the one that people weren't taking seriously and his ground game wasn't great, but he kind of pulled through with that really popular support and just resonating with people, being the outsider, being the businessman, not the politician. Nikki Haley, it's notable, didn't have many local endorsements in South Carolina, and that's one of the things that you would have expected the former governor, twice serving the state of South Carolina, to have more of those local members of Congress, to have more of those. I mean, in the US, you have sheriffs come out and endorse you. You have local party officials come out and endorse you at a really grassroots level. And that's where I would have expected more of that. But on the campaign trail too, it doesn't seem like she's been trading those endorsements either. Donald Trump's the one on Truth Social constantly posting endorsements for people. He has these meetings where he cycles people through and promises them endorsements, and it becomes this mutual beneficial thing. So that's just one of the ways she's kind of being outplayed on the campaign at the moment, and she's running out of time to turn it around.
Well, yeah, there are increasing calls for her to quit, to stop dividing the party if she's got no meaningful chance of succeeding. Now, we've got another national poll, GE poll, showing that the former president is still very much in the lead, beating Biden by 6 points. How much credence do you give to these polls, Annelise? There are so many in the US. And it's often said that Trump's support is understated in polling, but surely that can't be the case when you look at the lead he's developed in some of these polls.
Oh, yeah, and you're absolutely right. There is no end to the number of polls that come out in the United States, but you really have to look at these swing state polls. And so that's defined as any state that had a margin of less than 3%. Those are the ones that can change and deliver those critical electoral college votes that will actually decide how this election plays out. And one of the unprecedented things we're facing in this is Donald Trump's trials. We don't know how these are going to land. We don't know if they're going to knock him out. And while he has more of the grassroots funding, he's not got the big donors behind him. And that's becoming a problem when we're talking about his legal fees and the fine he just received from this civil case in New York. That is not an insignificant amount of money to be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars when election campaigns cost multi-billion US dollars.
Now, the president's son is insisting he's facing the ultimate test for a recovering addict, going so far to say that democracy is at risk if he relapses. Hunter Biden told Axios, "You have to believe you're worth the work or you'll never be able to get sober. But I often do think of the profound consequences of failure here. I have something much bigger than even myself at stake. We are in the middle of a fight for the future of democracy." Oh my gosh, Annelise, talk about delusions of grandeur.
Well, I mean, talk about mismanaged problem because, okay, look at the fact that he's doing this interview with Axios. Axios is a great publication. It's very reputable, but it's known for being the one that gets information out quick in breaking news with policy dot points. So to have an interview about your son's drug addiction in this kind of format, it shows that they're so nervous about how this information is going to get out. They have to put it in this really limited and kind of awkward format. And it also shows that they don't know how to handle this going into the election, that they know it is going to be a problem. They're trying to manage Joe Biden's immigration policy issues. He's having to go to the border now and ending up on the same day as Donald Trump, which will be on Thursday. But the other thing that they're looking at is what's going to happen on Capitol Hill with the special prosecutor who looked into Biden's classified documents is going to be testifying. And there's a real push to have the full transcript of Biden's interviews with that. And so they're going to be facing so many questions about his mental capacity. that this is just another fire that they're going to have to put out.
Is it just a transcript, or is there a possibility that we may actually hear the tapes and hear what the special prosecutor was referring to about how confused he was, how he was forgetting key moments, including his vice presidency when his son passed away, all sorts of data you would expect him to retain?
Yeah, and that turned out to be one of the most emotive points when Biden called that extraordinary late-night press conference, when he said that they brought it up and that's why he lost his temper and lost his place. My understanding is there are tapes, and that's where the transcripts have come from, that they've been transcribed from those tapes, and people want to see them. They want to hear what's in them. It's not necessarily the normal protocol, but given how significant this is, there might be a way that House Republicans can find it. By the same token, because they have decided to not proceed with the trial, that tends to be when this stuff doesn't get made public, because there's no argument for public interest there necessarily. So I think we all want to see it, but whether they can find a way to make it happen is the question.
Now, social media has erupted in the past couple of weeks over Google's AI technology after it found all sorts of just craziness. Indian Prime Minister Modi was called a fascist. It showed America's founding fathers to be women of colour, generated images of the Pope as an Indian woman. I mean, the list is endless. Google's paused its Gemini AI technology from generating images while it seeks to correct this so-called woke bug. But Annelise, it isn't a bug at all. This is very much by design. And as Mark Andreessen put it, I know it's hard to believe, but big tech AI generates the output it does because it is precisely executing the specific ideological, radical, biased agenda of its creators. The apparently bizarre output is 100% intended. It is working as designed. It may be working as designed, but it's certainly not being accepted. Tell me about this story, because if you're not in the tech space, you may have missed it, but we all use Google, and this ideological capture is also evident elsewhere in the company.
Well, I mean, look, it all comes down to how this information is presented and what we're telling AI we want to hear. And so this really goes to the broader issue of how much we give AI the opportunity to be crafting what we put down as objective facts and the truth. And I mean, be careful what you wish for. If you start to rewrite history to that extent, then what does that mean for the rest of us? I mean, if you talk about rewriting our founding fathers as African-American, how does that lend itself to a conversation about reforming the Electoral College because of criticism that it's based off of racist principles? I mean, we have there was a point at which it was 3/5 of a vote for every black person compared to white people. But how do you have that conversation if you've rewritten what just happened before? But this is just so much a part of the conversation around how we need more transparency around how these tech companies put this information together and shape what we're fed, because that's so critical. It's not how you are picking up Google and saying, I want to find this information. It's the information they're presenting to you to feed what they have designed as the information that's important.
Absolutely, and then we've got cases of Google admitting as far back as 2018 that their search results are designed to favour equity over accuracy. This is, I think, an issue we need to talk a lot more about because they've got a monopoly. It's a very powerful monopoly. Annelise Nielsen, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Still to come, relationship coach Jake Maddock has some harsh advice. But is it sexist? He'll be joining me next. And of course, a bumper edition of Lefties Losing It. Welcome back. Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's start with a regular contributor to Lefties Losing It, MSNBC's Joy Reid, who seems to think America's illegal immigration crisis can't be real if people are still having babies.
The United States has a population of north of 327 million people. why do we need more kids? If more people come into the southern border, this is some sort of crisis because we've got too many people and we've got no more space and we can't afford more people. But now you're saying we need more kids? Can you explain who's the we and what's the purpose?
The lefty lunacy wasn't over yet. Let's get a history lesson from Joy now. He thinks Republicans want to bring back slavery.
There was a time when the state of Alabama absolutely needed more kids because, Alabama was a slave state. And the mandate of the planter class in Alabama was for black women to produce more kids because those kids were property. And they could work more kids and make more money on their plantations. Are you saying the state of Alabama needs more kids because you think that those populations will include people who are maybe destitute and desperate enough if you kick out the immigrants like a lot of y'all want to do and you could make them do the work that the migrants are doing now? Because that kind of sounds slavery-ish. Is the state of Alabama the we? And is that the why? I mean, you're also a white guy. Are you saying the we is white folks need more kids?
Wow, that woman is an anchor on MSNBC, someone who was claiming all sorts of bizarre stuff like 9/11 conspiracy theories and homophobic content, was put on her blog by some sort of a time-travelling hacker. Now, if you thought EV drivers were self-delighted and obnoxious, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. This woman drove up a private home's driveway to use their electricity to charge her car, and then she's outraged that she's asked to stop.
Hi, how are you? Oh, no, thanks. I'm just charging my car. Are you recording me right now? Is that why your phone's up like that?
I am recording you because you're on my property, and I'm sorry that your car is about to die, but...
Okay, so you have to stop recording me and stop recording my plates. My husband is an attorney, so you're not going to put this video anywhere, so I'm not sure what you're doing with your phone. I'll be done in like 20 minutes. It's really not that big of a deal. Can you back away from my car,
you're
please?
You're in my driveway.
I understand that, but can you back away from my car, please? It worked just fine.
I didn't even know.
Back yourself. I'm not putting it back either.
All right.
Ungrateful much. Now let's go to Warsaw for this blast from the past. Yeah, Warsaw. We don't have content from there too often. But here we have a group of women and a couple of men making a very powerful point. And let's take a look at lefties losing it in New York, attacking comic Jerry Seinfeld, accusing him of committing genocide and of being a Nazi. This is a Jewish comic. Joining me now is controversial relationship coach Jake Maddock, who is quite the online sensation. He helps lonely hearts find the one, but his advice is sometimes not appreciated by all.
Of women when they let themselves go. Don't let yourself go. Don't gain 20 kilos of fat because firstly, you won't like yourself and then in turn, you'll sabotage your relationship from a lack of confidence. Don't do that. And you only have one body. So don't be lazy. Don't let yourself go.
Jake, welcome to the program. Your advice is certainly blunt, but is it effective?
Very effective, 100%. Thanks for having me, by the way.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Tell me what reaction you get, because a lot of the things you advise men and women, well, they're not used to hearing.
That's true. I teach a lot of masculine and feminine energy type stuff, so nothing too controversial, really. A man should open a door for a woman, stuff like that, and the man should pay for the date, which I think it should be that way. Some people don't agree, but I think women deserve those things. If you really want to achieve a 10 out of 10, where's the chivalry? I think guys should be more chivalrous.
Well, absolutely. Let's have a quick look at a clip where you talk about this masculine, feminine energy and the roles.
He should lead our relationship. That's correct. I believe we are a partnership. Thoughts? You're wrong. Masculine and feminine energy states that a man is the leader, you are the supportive role. That's masculine and feminine energy. If you want to be a leader in your relationship will fail. Masculine and feminine energy, some people don't think it's fair. Masculine and feminine energy in relationships aren't about fairness. They're about love and happiness.
Jake, what do you say to those who say, well, no, that advice is sexist, it's too old-fashioned?
Yeah, I hear it. A lot of people try to make men and women the same. Here's the thing, that's not really fair. It's men and women are very different, and women deserve to be treated differently than men do. A lot of people call that old-fashioned, but relationships do seem to go better, and you really got to embrace masculine and feminine energy if you really want to achieve a 10 out of 10 relationship properly. And really, there's nothing really wrong with that. I think it goes fantastic.
Now, you say women should not accept what you call low-value dates. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so a lot of guys these days will be like, hey, I like you, can I take you out for a cup of coffee? That's a low-value date. Where's the effort? It's not enough chance for anything romantic to happen. I want to see a proper high-value date. He picks the girl up, opens the car door, takes her to a nice restaurant. I want to see a decent amount of effort.
So what does that say if you are a woman and you accept a coffee date or you accept a walk in the park? Does that devalue you? What's the mistake there?
Yeah, so basically if a woman says yes to hanging out or going for a walk and stuff like that, it's just showing you that her confidence isn't that high in herself, and she's basically willing to accept less than optimum behavior from a guy. And the thing is, it's not saying that guy's necessarily a bad guy, more that he probably also lacks confidence in dating as well. Dating should be done correctly.
Now, what if there is a relationship and there's infidelity in that relationship? Do you advise your clients to stay if there has been cheating?
As my general rule is,
no?
The instant betrayal that occurs, it's over. Any betrayal, it's done.
There's no coming back from that.
I don't think so. I think relationships can only take so much damage. Once a certain amount of damage has been caused, I don't think you can get it to a 10 out of 10. And that memory is always there too. Yeah.
Now, I think we need our viewers to send in some questions for you. I think we've got, next time you're on, we're going to have some broken hearts or, people looking for love. Come in with some questions. But this is something that is often a topic of discussion among women and men, I'm sure. What if your partner is friends with their ex? Is that a sign of maturity, or should that be perceived as a red flag?
It's definitely a red flag. What's very common these days is people trying to have PC type relationships. They think it's a sign of maturity to be friends with your ex and all this sort of stuff. It's not a sign of maturity. I would say it's a sign of just being not very wise, okay? The thing a lot of people need to remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you want to maximize the chance of success, being friends with your ex is definitely a bad idea. Human beings, we're naturally a little bit jealous, and it's okay. We do have the emotion of jealousy for a good reason. Don't be friends with your ex. A 10 out of 10 relationship, it's going to be the best thing you ever achieve. So I would say maximize your chance of success. And do you really want to be friends with your ex anyway? Why? Really? There's a lot of people to be friends with.
Well, you broke up for a reason. You're right there. Now, you're preaching relationship advice in an era where terms like toxic masculinity are thrown around every day, and you've got men like Harry Styles who are celebrated for their femininity and getting dressed up in female outfits. What impact does all that have on relationships, heterosexual relationships?
You know, it's very interesting. So I've coached thousands of people over the years. Not much, okay? Really, really not much. The majority of people I talk to, they want a relationship where the woman's feminine and the guy's masculine. The thing with masculine femininity, I think a lot of people have misconceptions about what that is. They think about, okay, feminine energy is a girl in a pink dress with the hair and riding the pink bicycle down the street. Feminine energy is really just being nurturing, caring, supportive, and joyous. It's nothing too complicated. It's just basically some behavioral traits, so a lot of people have these misconceptions. So they think about masculinity as a guy beating his chest like some sort of Tarzan gorilla or something. Masculine energy is just about leadership, ambition, decisiveness, and protection. You can be a normal sort of a brilliant, vibrant member of the community and still do those attributes really, really well.
Oh, absolutely. I think masculinity has got a bad rap recent years. Now, just finally, tell me how you went from being a tradie in Hervey Bay to a relationship guru now. You've got clients from all around the world seeking your advice on how to find the perfect partner.
Yeah, 100%. I struggled with relationships for years. My 20s was a headache, really. It was not fun. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know. I looked masculine, but I didn't know how to do masculine energy. My emotions were all over the shop. I was just hopeless at relationships. Didn't know what I was doing. And I wanted to be good at relationships. So I studied and learned and put in lots of effort and just learned everything I could about relationships. And then I started teaching one person and two people. And before you know it, thousands of people later. And it's just my passion in life, Rita. I do this 7 days a week. I love it. I love helping people achieve a 10 out of 10. It's exciting.
Jake Maddock, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really appreciate it. And that's it from me tonight. Don't go anywhere. Up next is Newsnight. Good night.